Hey everyone, Scott here with Planning Center, and today we're going to talk about check-ins. To give you a brief overview of what we're going to talk about is first I'm going to show you what things look like once everything is done. So if you've set everything up, how does that process look and feel? And then we're going to show you how to set that up, and then I'm going to show you some tips and tricks along the way, and I'm going to show you some things that you can do during and after the event. But before we get into all of that, the first thing that I want to show you is the most important thing to show you, and that is at the top right of every one of our Planning Center products is this question mark here. And the question mark is our help desk. This is where you're going to find things like documentation. You can contact our support team, and you could write in any feature requests that you might have down here. So we even have suggested articles for you to read up here based on the page that you're on. And you can see here that our average reply time right now is 32 minutes. So if you have a question right now, you could write in and you'll get that answer before this video is over. It's pretty awesome. So also this training is going to be available for you after the event. It's live right now, but after this is over, we're going to have it up on YouTube and at planning.center/university. With all of our other university videos are there as well. All right, let's get into it. I'm going to show you what check-ins looks like once everything is all set up. There's 3 different types of stations when it comes to check-ins. This here is a self station, and this is used for those people who know what they're doing. They've done it before and they're coming back and they just type in their phone number or scan a barcode and move on. We also have a manned station, and that's really for people who, it's like for a volunteer to man it. So people that you need to add or edit, then that's what the manned station is for. And then we have a roster station. So say you have the same 12 kids every week, and you just want check boxes next to their name to check them in that way. That's what a roster station is. I'm going to go ahead and show you on the self station, though. You can type in a phone number to pull that up, or you can scan a barcode. And what's kind of neat about the barcode is that you can use whatever barcode that you want. So if you have, like a Sam's Club or a Costco card, based on where you live, you can use that just on your keychain. You can scan that in. But we also have a neat feature called the mobile pass. Now what this does is it shows up if you're half a mile away from your church. It'll automatically pop up, and you can just tap that, and you've got a barcode to scan. So we'll type this camera icon, we'll scan that barcode, and it's going to pull up your household. And no matter how you search, if you did use the phone number or a different station or anything, it's still going to pull up the same household. And you got a couple things going on here. You can see that some people are pre-checked. You can see that Tiffany here and Troy are pre-checked, and that's because one of 2 reasons. Either that's the location that they went to last week, or you've set up filters to automatically put them in the right location. So if you're between 3rd and 5th grade, you go to the penguin room, or something like that. But let's say that Tiffany didn't show up that week, or Troy didn't show up that week, and you just click on their name to select them or deselect them. And then and the object here is you pull up your household as quickly as possible, and you check in the 2 people, and it's done, and you can move on and you get your labels. But before we print those, I want to show you this checked in by thing. What this does is it prints that person's name and cell phone number on the label. So if you know that Tiffany got hurt, you know who was there that day and how to contact them, which is pretty cool. So we'll go ahead and check in those 2 people. That'll connect to the printer here in a second, and it prints it out. And what it's going to do is it prints out a name label for each one of the children, and then it looks like 2 name labels for Tiffany. I'll show you how that works later. And then we got one for Troy, and then we have a couple security codes as well. And there's a lot of different settings you can have with this, but I'll kind of tell you what this looks like. So first, the name label, it has your name, it has the locations that they checked into, and it has the time and the date on there, and then it has the allergy information. That way you know on the child before you give them anything if they have any allergies. And we have that checked in by name and cell phone number. And then lastly, we have the security code. And that security code matches the same security code that goes to the parent. So What's neat about this is, like, let's say it comes time to check out. You could do one of two things. You can just like physically check them out, like with your eyes, where you just like match these two things. This parent matches with this child, take them and go. You don't have to use check-ins for that. But if you want to record things like, who checked that person out or what time, what actual time they checked out, then you can use check-ins for that as well. And that's basically it. The whole point of check-ins is to be fast as possible for you. Fast, flexible, and secure is kind of what we're all about. So the fastest way that you can check in is actually through our, let me show you this real quick, through our Church Center app. And this is a new app that we have. In the Church Center app, it's basically an application that aggregates all of your the products that you already have, so you can give online. On the bottom there, you can sign up for groups, you can register for events, and you can pre-check in there. So I'm going to click on check-in, and because there's one live event right now, it's going to go straight to that event. It is assumed it's going to be a Sunday morning event, and I could just tap on the names of those people. And you can see that it's automatically putting them into the right location. So at 12, we got kids worship. At 1:30, we have Blue Elephants. And we also have different things for Troy down here. We do still have the checked in by there on the bottom left. You can choose somebody else if you'd like there. But that's automatically defaulted to the person who signed in. So we'll go ahead and hit next. And that creates this QR code. Now, this is a magical QR code. So this is a really cool one, because when you arrive to church and you scan this QR code, instead of having to do anything with the actual label, it's going to automatically print all of those particular labels, which is great. So you don't have to touch anything. You don't have to go into, basically you don't have to touch any of the stuff. So it's the fastest way to check in. And what I mean by that is what we generally suggest is you have a self-station with the camera kind of like just always on for those people. They can check in their car or at their home, and when they arrive, they scan it and it immediately prints. So that's kind of what things look like as it's set up. The object, to check people in, print labels, move on. Be as fast and secure as possible with that. The next question people have before they get started is they want to know what kind of devices they can use. So we support a whole bunch of different devices. When it comes to the thing that you're actually checking them in with, it can be iOS, Android, Mac, or Windows. But each one of those things connects to a different type of printer. So when it comes to iOS and Android, you can use this Brother printer here. This Brother printer runs about $130 or so on Amazon, and it's a pretty solid printer. It's probably our most popular printer with mobile churches or mobile devices like that. We do support another mobile printer though, and that's this Citizen printer here, which is kind of cool. This one connects to your belt, which is kind of neat. So it'll connect to your belt, and you can just like be in the parking lot, as people arrive, check them in with your phone, print that label on their belts, and move on like that. It's kind of cool. So this will connect to your hip, and you could look hip doing that. Yeah. Those are the mobile printers there. If you want to support like desktop laptops, so like Mac and Windows printers, our most popular one is the Dymo printer. This Dymo printer runs about $110. Oh, I didn't say. The reason this one's a little bit expensive, the Citizen, sorry, I'm going to go back. This one runs about $430. All of these printers are on an article, by the way, so you can look up all that information. But anyway, our most popular printer is this Dymo printer that we have. Runs about $110 or so on Amazon. That's probably the cheapest place that you can get it. And that's just a good, solid printer. But if you're one of those churches that needs like high octane, a whole lot of people checking in, then we've got this Behemoth, the Zebra printer. So this one runs about $350, but it is by far the fastest prints out there, and it's really sturdy. So you can kind of beat this guy up, and it's a pretty solid printer. So this is really fast. This is still fast, but this is just much faster. So that's the printers there. The next question when it comes to hardware is like, how do I scan those QR codes, right? So like in most cases, if you're using a phone or an iPad or a tablet device, you can just use the camera connected to that. But if you are using a desktop or laptop, you can use the USB scanner. And these are kind of neat. We suggest the Honeywell one. First of all, it's really important that you use a 2D scanner. Those are the only ones that will scan the QR code that comes with Church Center. So you'll definitely need a 2D scanner. We like this one because when it's in the stand, it's like always on, so it's always scanning. So you just hover, your phone underneath it, it'll scan immediately. And you don't have to push a button or anything like that. So that's the hardware for check-ins. Now let's go into setting up all of the check-ins. So the first question that you're going to have is how do I get all the people ready to be checked in? And basically, when it comes to check-ins, you don't have to add them to the admin side of the interface. Once they're in Planning Center People, meaning once they're in any of our applications, they are ready to be checked in. So the only caveat there is if somebody is inactive, and the reason for that inactiveness is that they're deceased, we hide that on the check-in station. But everybody else is shown, and if you're inactive and you checked in, we automatically switch you to active because you just checked in, so you're active. But yeah, that's your people. That's basically it. All you want to do is put people into the people product of Planning Center. And if you don't know how to do that, I would look up in the people product, looked up a CSV import. That's probably the fastest way to get everybody over. The other thing I want to mention with people, though, is that we do have administrators. So administrators basically have access to the admin side of check-ins. And remember, there's kind of two sides to check-ins. There's a check-in station that I showed when we first started, and then there's the admin side. And so when I go into a people profile on the far right, there's this permission tabs. You can set somebody as an admin, and you can set them as a viewer, so they only can view the admin side. That's for people who you want to be able to, just look at stats or look at what's going on. Or you can set them as an editor, somebody who, obviously can edit everything. So that's people. Now let's go ahead and look at an event. I'm not going to walk through how to create an event because we actually have pretty good walkthroughs on that. So just read those, watch the videos that are kind of prompted for you, and you'll know how to set it up. But let's jump into an event that's already set up. And check this out. This is our Sunday morning event. The first thing that is in the setup section over here on the left is times. I'm going to jump to times. And I do want to say that the times are a little bit weird right now because we're filming this on a Thursday at 10:30 or so on a Thursday. So generally these are going to be Sundays, and generally you're going to have a more appropriate times like 9 a.m. and 10:30 or whatever your service times are. But because these have to be in the future and we're at 10:30 right now, we chose 12 and 1:30. So don't let that distract you. But there's two things with times that's really important to point out. First is this show at and hide at section. You can decide to show this event of Sunday morning at a certain time. And the real purpose of that is, let's say you do have a 9 a.m. service, but you don't want anybody to check in until 8 a.m. You can make sure that event doesn't show until 8 by setting that show at time. And that's the same with the hide at. There. Now, something to note here, all the show ats and hide ats, all they do is they show the event or not. So you can still be able to check in to both times once that event is live, but this is basically showing the event. The other thing I want to point out is this thing called excluded locations. You can see 5 excluded locations here and 1 excluded at this time. I'm going to show you a good example, but I think it's better if you look at just have a visual of what we got going on. We have these locations down here, and at the elementary, we have kids worship, and we have all our individual 1st through 5th grade thing. So at our first service, we want everybody to check into kids worship. We don't allow people to go to the 1st and 5th grade classrooms, right? But then in our second service, it's the opposite. We want to hide the kids worship. We want to exclude that one, and we just want them to check into the specific locations. So I'll go back here to our times. This is where you would set that up. So if you click on that, there's this excluded locations tab up here, and you can add any of the locations that you've already created to be excluded. So that's what that's all about. Next, when it comes to setup, is our labels and locations. And this is the bulk of the work that needs to happen. First thing I want to show you is how you organize your locations is very important. And we encourage you to create folders and locations to make that happen. You can see our setup here. We have a preschool and kindergarten folder, then we have elementary, and then we have youth and adult classes down here. They're all, one of the reasons is just to keep it organized, just so visually you can see it. But the big reason here is because that's how we base your labels. Meaning, we've added in the preschool and kindergarten a security label and also a name label. That's going to trickle down to all the locations under here. So you add the labels here, and they'll trickle down to here. But you can see in the youth folders in adult classes, we don't care about the labels. We just want them to check in. That's how you can make sure that they don't have any labels. The other thing I want to mention about folders is I clicked on that folder there. We have this distribution setting. And this is kind of neat because so let's say you're a church where you have 3 third grade classrooms, right? And in those classrooms, there's 2 different ways to fill up those classrooms. There's what we call the waterfall way, where everybody goes into the first location. It fills up to like 10 kids or whatever you might have. And then it opens up the next location, fills those up. And then it opens up the third location and fills those up. So that's waterfall. Or you can say, I want it to be balanced, right? And that's where it's like, as people come in, 1 goes here, 1 here, 1 here, and then 2, 2, 2, and it's just kind of more of a balanced thing. So that's where you can set those distribution settings of waterfall or perfectly balanced, as all things should be. So that is the folder settings. Then we're going to go into a location. So I'm going to click on nursery here, and you can see this section, this filter section right here, is really where I want you to spend the time and effort to make things as smooth as possible for you. Most of the time, you're going to be using grade filters. And why check-ins is different to some other applications is instead of assigning a location to a person, we set up filters on those locations. So that way when you're adding a new person, you don't have to think about how to assign them or where they need to go. All you think about is what grade they are in. So you just add it to their profile, and we're going to automatically put you into the right location based on these filters. So most of the time, you should be using grade filters for all the grades. We then have an ages filter, and that's really created for anybody who doesn't have a grade yet. So this is like all like pre-K and before type of people. And you can see that we have, ages, you could say 0 to 18 months. So generally you want to use months as people progress with that. We then have this show advanced options. Most people don't need the advanced options. So I would encourage you not to do that, especially if you're getting started out. But when you do click on that, we kind of explain it a little bit. And there's an article that explains that if things aren't working out, you then go there later. But most of the time, you just want to set up grade filters and then your age filters for preschool and anything before that. We also have adult and child filters. So this one's really important. If you have like a volunteer location that you have people checking in, you want to make sure that no children are available to go into that. So you can set a adult child. You could say, I only want to allow adults in here and set that. Now that brings up a really good point. The goal here is that there's only one location that's available to everybody. That way, when they're checking in, they don't have to choose anything. To make that as fast as possible, you only want one possible outcome for them. So don't have any overlapping filters, right? Don't do 1st through 3rd grade and then 2nd through 4th, right? Because those 3rd graders will have to choose all of the time. So just make sure there's only one location available for everybody. Of course, we have gender. We do have require at least volunteers. So if you're one of those churches that you want to make sure there's at least 2 volunteers before all the other children check in, then you can require 2 volunteers before it opens up everybody else. We then have our capacity. That's an easy one. That's like, I only want to allow 10 kids in here. So that's capacity. And then we have our ratio. Ratio is kind of interesting because it opens the door up to more children as volunteers check in. So like the ratio is limited to 10 attendees for every one volunteer. So one volunteer checks in, 10 kids can check in. A second volunteer checks in, it opens up another 10 kids. So you can have 20 kids in that one. So that's the filters. Again, this is where I want you to spend most of the time. This is where I want you to spend, all the thought power in your brain to figure out how to use that. We then have our background check. So if you want to make sure that you only allow people with a cleared background check to be able to check in as a volunteer, that's where you would do that. You can then add labels, and then we have options. Now, both of these things, labels and options, are two different ways to solve one problem. And the problem is, let's say like you're in a nursery and you want to make sure that an extra label is printed out for every one of the, for the diaper bags, basically. So you want to put that name label on the diaper bag so you know who it is, and you make sure that you pick it up when class is over. So there's two ways to solve that. One, you can add an extra label to that location like we did up top here. It's one way to solve that. That means every person that checks in will get that extra label. Or you can set up an option. I'll go ahead and click edit here. An option of a diaper bag would mean that they would print that label if they select that option. So that's, again, two different ways to solve the same problem. Do you want it to print for everybody in that location, or do you want it just to print an extra one if they select the option? The other thing options does is it prints the name of that option on the name label. So if you want to make sure that something like if they're nursery or not is on the label, you can choose that there. Yeah, so that's the bulk of this. But before I move on, I want to show you one more thing that's important. Sometimes there's an instance where, let's say like it's like a special needs case, right? Where somebody really does fit into 5th grade, and 5th grade should be on their profile, but they should be going to the 3rd grade classroom. In those cases, we do have an option for you. If you go to people and you go into somebody like Aaron Stewart here, you can choose ignore age and grade filters. What that's going to do is basically it just keeps whatever their last check-in was. So if you'll have to go on a man station the first time, so you can check them into that 3rd grade classroom, and then every time for the rest of time, it's going to suggest that 3rd grade classroom again, unless you change it on a man station again. So that's for special needs cases most of the time, but and that's where it lives. It lives on the profile of each one of those people. All right, so that's us. We set up check-ins. Now let's actually start checking people in. So I'm going to jump over here to a manned station. You saw the self earlier. This is a manned station, and we're gonna just pull up a household. Now, one of the great tips of if you do have a keyboard is to you want to be as fast as possible, right? So the fastest way to pull somebody up is to just type the first 2 letters of the first name and the first 2 letters of their last name. So I need to pull up Ashley Johnson, so I'm just going to type in those 2 letters, hit enter, and it's going to pull up that whole household. And once you're here, if you are using a keyboard, it's really important to try to learn some of the shortcut keys we have. So you can see that we can go down if we want to, deselect somebody or deselect somebody. You can hit the space bar, all of those kind of things. If I hit the question mark here, I can see a list of all the shortcut keys that we have. And we have 2 sections there. We have the shortcut keys that you can use on pretty much every page, and then we have the shortcut keys that's only available in that particular household. So you can see if I want to get to the details of that person, I can hit the D button. So let me show you. I'll go ahead and go to Lisa. I'll hit D, which is the equivalent of hitting this pencil icon over here. I'll hit D, and it goes to the details. And again, see what's happening here is that at the 12 o'clock, it's suggesting kids worship, and at the 1:30, it's selecting 1st grade. Again, just to emphasize something I talked about earlier, We excluded all the first grade locations on the 12 o'clock, and we excluded the kids worship at the 1:30. So that's the only thing available. But because you're on a manned station, you should be able to do what you want because a volunteer is manning that station, right? So we have this option to show all locations here, where you can click on that and you can see everything, and you pretty much override anything that you like. So that's basically it. You could also change them to regular guest and volunteer and move on there. Yeah, so the last thing I want to show you is, remember that checked in by thing that we talked about? Right now, most of the time, that's going to show the names of the people who are adults in that household. But you can see that Tony Stark here is able to be selected too. That's what we call a trusted person. And you can add and edit trusted people down here. But that's like, let's say you have a case where you might have a neighbor, or you might have like a grandma who's not in the household, but you trust them to be able to pick up that child. That's what trusted people is all about right there. Okay, and that's basically it with the man station. It's very, very similar to the self station, except it allows you to edit those details and override everything, basically. The other thing that it'll let you do is add people, right? So you can edit and you can add on that. And let me show you some tips on how to add people. So the first thing is I would type in the person's name that you're adding. So George Herman here, he doesn't exist. I'm going to type that person, and I can start over, or I can hit add person. We're going to go ahead and add a new household. By the way, all of these have shortcut keys too, so if you get used to it, you could be real quick about it. Now, something we found out is that you want to add different information based on whether that person is an adult or if that person is a child. So if that person's an adult, you're going to want like contact information, right? So you want email address and phone number. But if that person is a child, you're going to want like birth date, school, grade, medical notes, all the things that print on the label or help you direct to the right location. Right, so we set it up to try to be as fast as possible as adding, but if you want to get access to everything, you can hit that arrow down there and you have access to everything. Now, it's important here, when you're adding a new family, it's best to start with the adult first. And generally, the only thing that's necessary for saving profile is first and last name. But I would encourage you to also get that phone number, mostly because that's what gets printed on the label. So if you do need to contact somebody, it's on the label right there. But what's also cool about that is that first person that you add, if you add a home address or a home phone number, that's going to automatically be added to everybody else that you add later, which is kind of neat. So we can, if you're ready for somebody else, we want to add, Tyler Herman, for example. We'll add that person, and we kind of have this like this view that you can keep adding people as you want, and you can see that it's defaulted here to a child for everybody else. So that's the best thing for adding people. Start with the adult, get that phone number, get that address, and then go with all the children after that. The last thing I want to show, I'm going to go ahead and discard these changes because I'm not going to save them. Last thing I want to show is how to edit station things, station settings on the station side. And at the bottom right of all the stations is this little gear icon. Now, you don't want to give access to change all these settings to anybody. So so what we've done is we've created this thing called a station key. And on the admin side of check-ins, you can add a station key, you'll have to set up that key, basically, is what I'm saying. You'll have to set up that key, and you'll have to pick out what that key is. But once you do type in that super secret password, you'll have access to edit the station. And I'll just kind of walk through some of these things on what these things do with the station. First, you can change the station type from man, self to roster here. But let me show you this lock too. So this second section, lock station to event or location. That's really important. Like, let's say you're a multi-campus church. You have a North Campus and a South Campus, and you have two events going on at the same time, right? Both of those campuses have a 10 o'clock service that you go to. You want to make sure when someone comes to the South Campus that they can't check into that North Campus, and vice versa. That's where locking the station comes from, helps, right? So we want to lock that specific station to this event. But you can even go deeper than that. Let's say that I'm in that South Campus and we do check-ins based on floor, right? Because all the elementary classrooms are on this one floor and we have a check-in station there. So you can say, I want to lock it to Sunday morning and to the folder of elementary. Or you can even say if you want to do check-ins at every single location, you can also lock each one of those stations to that location. And just another tip, check-ins has unlimited stations, right? So whatever flow works for you better, if you have it in the lobby, if you have it in the hallway, if you have it per classroom, it's up to you. It doesn't cost any more in order to have more stations. You just need more devices, basically. That does have a cost, but you know that. So yeah, that's the lock to a station. Then we're going to talk about print to. This is a really cool feature that allows you to use one device, like say my phone, to print through or print to another desktop and print that. And that's really cool because so let's say you have an example where this line is getting super long of people checking in. I can pull out my phone, start checking people in there. It's going to print through this computer to the printer that it's hooked up to. That's another way. Like some people say that they would prefer to use Dymo and iPads. Remember, those don't connect directly to each other, but if you like, you can connect the iPads to print to another laptop or desktop that has the Dymo plugged in. So you can set it up however you like with that. And lastly, we have the theme. You can see in the station mode here, we have this purple thing. That theme just allows you to change it to whatever you want. So a lot of people actually have their logo as a theme in the back. So that's another cool way to do that. Let me type this in again. The last thing I want to show you is this roster station. We showed you the self, we showed you the man. Now we have the roster station. And this is basically like that clipboard style roster station here. All these green checks mean that those people are already checked in, but there is a few who are not checked in to that, and there's a lot of people here. So you can actually filter down just to elementary if you want there. You can filter to whatever you like. But what's kind of neat about this is we encourage your teachers to have a roster station on their phone. What's neat is they can switch to checkout mode. This particular mode is live updates. What's cool about that is, let's say you're one of those situations where you have, people are checking into the lobby and then the kid has to walk down the hallway and come into the classroom. That teacher could have their roster station on their phone and they can see that a live updated, oh, Johnny just checked in. And then when Johnny comes in, you're like, hey, Johnny, and you can pretend that you knew Johnny's name when he arrived, right? So that's a cool way to try to connect and be, well informed as people are checking in, is these roster stations. I also want to bring up, you can see Adriel here has a not authorized person here. This is basically the opposite of a trusted person, right? This is someone who, it might be like a divorced family. You want to make sure the mom or the dad can't pick up that person. Every time that goes into checkout mode, you're going to get an alert that says there is an authorized person there. If you want to see that authorized person, you can click on that and you can see that person. And apparently this Bruce Banner, I heard he has anger issues, so that totally makes sense to me. All right, so that's that. That is basically all the things that you can use during the event, right? How to check people in. Now I'm going to move into what you can kind of do after the event. So let's jump to the admin side of things. So here in the admin side, we have this great graph. This is something that I just want you to play with, right? There's a lot of neat things. You can hover, you can see what's going on, and I could even just filter down just to a specific specific event if I want, so I can see kind of what's going on. I'm going to show you main head counts in a little bit, but you do have this option. This is a tip where you can say, I don't want to see my regulars, or I don't want to see the head counts over here. I just want to see what's going on. So you can click on these guys down here and it disappears and it updates the average attendance as you do that. So anyway, play with that. That's a pretty fun thing to play with there. We're going to go into an event, into Sunday morning. I already talked about setup stuff, so let's just talk about the stuff up at the top. And that's the overview. So you have all your total people, regular guests, volunteers, and then you also have these like fun stats that we think are helpful, like how many more first timers than last week happened, that kind of thing. I think the most helpful thing though is these graphs here on the right, so you can see which time is the most popular one. And this, what's kind of neat here is this example might not be true, but you can get the concept here. You can see which locations are most popular. So if the fourth grade classroom, for example, had like 7 volunteers, you can see they're overloaded with volunteers, but Kid Worship has none of them. So maybe we should look at, moving some of those guys around. That's basically why this is useful, which is kind of neat. Another thing is this check-ins tab over here. This is a live tab as well. So as people are checking in, they're automatically going to pop up here. You can search by people's name. If I just want to type A, I can just do that, or type, and I can just keep typing and it automatically searches there. You can also filter just to the locations that you want to, filter to times. You can say, I just want to see, the guests. Looks like there's 0. So I just want to see that the volunteers, are going on. Or I just want to see how many people have not checked out. This is all a fun way to really just see what's going on in the health of your church. We also encourage some teachers to have this aspect on their phone, and they can really get all the information that they want. So if you click on one of these people, you can get all the information that you need, like what their medical notes are real quick, who checked them in, what their household looks like, and where they're at for all the times. The last thing on this page, the check-ins page, is this add check-ins button. So if you had a situation where maybe the internet went out and you want to backload last week's check-ins or something like that, you can click on this add check-ins, and that's how you manually add people to past events. That's what that's all about. And then we're going to move to reports. Reports is another thing that I just want you to kind of play with. There's a whole bunch of options. I'm going to jump into this first-time visitors report, just kind of give you an overview of what those look like. But at the bottom here is all the information that you want to include in that report. And there's a whole bunch of different options there that you can play with. But over here at the top left is the scope of what people you want to include. So do I want, do I want just this session with first-timers? Or do I want any sessions in the past 7, but have missed at least 3 of those? So those are the people who aren't, the constant attenders. So that kind of thing. So whatever you choose, you can also change the layout there. The most popular layout is create a page by each location and then organize subgroups by time. What that'll do is it'll print out one page for, just like first graders, and then there'll be subgroups of your 9 o'clock and your 10:30 service, whatever those might be. So that's reports. I definitely want to encourage you to play with that. However, I think one of the most powerful things that we have at Planning Center is actually in Planning Center people. And I want to just show you a real quick thing, because this is really important for children's leaders as well, especially if you're using check-ins. You can automate a whole bunch of things that you're doing. So just 2 examples of that. You can create lists in people that basically automatically refresh. So I have 2 lists going on here. One is just the first-time visitors list. A second is missing last 3 weeks. What this list is doing is it's pulling everybody who has checked into the last 6 months, but who have not checked in to the last 6 weeks, right? Because those are the kids that are potentially falling through the cracks. Something might be happening and you need to contact them and try to follow up with them. And that's where workflows comes into play. All those lists that you can add can automatically be sent to a workflow. And what's neat about the workflow is you can see that first-time visitors workflow. You can say, workflow is basically like a selection of steps that you can assign to a person. So when first-time visitors here, you could say, I want to make sure that I first call those people in the first week, and the next week we send a care package, and then, in the next week, like contact them. Whatever you kind of want to do as your first-time visitors workflow, you can create that in here. But also more importantly is that falling through the cracks, that's what I add. That's that list of people who haven't showed up in the last 3 weeks automatically gets here sent to this workflow. What's really neat about that is instead of having to run reports every week and trying to figure out all of these things, you can set this up once, and then every Monday morning, you then have notifications automatically on your phone or in people that say you need to follow up with those people. So you can be really confident that you have the tools that you need to make sure people don't fall through the cracks. And that I think is incredibly powerful. All right, so the other thing that I want to show before we move on is headcount. So there's kind of two different aspects of taking attendance. There in check-ins, there's the attendance where you want individual people, like we've been doing, where you're tracking individual people. But sometimes there are things that you want to track where you don't really care about the people, you just care about the number. So like I want to track how many people showed up in worship service, or I want to track how many showed up in the youth service, that kind of thing. That's where head counts comes into play. And here's where you can add your head counts, and you can edit these type of things. But I actually want to show you the application for the head counts here. And this one's kind of cool. The application here, you can see a graph of what's going on, and you can see those head counts. If I click on youth, for example, there's two ways to do those head counts. One cool way is here. You can hit the plus button as they're like if you're standing at the door, you can do that, and you can go minus. What's kind of neat, we put haptic feedback in that too, so you can like be under the table and like do that, so that it doesn't look like you're just on your phone when you're doing that. So that's one way to do head counts. And then the second way to do head counts is by just like if you've counted all of them up at the end, you can do it that way. You can just type in the number and hit save. So that's head counts. And let's see. I think there's a couple other things I want to talk about that don't really fit with that flow. So let me just bring that up. First is this thing called direct printing. So I'm over here in the stations view. I haven't showed this yet, I don't think, but this is just a list of all the stations that have been created, and you can sort that list however you want there. But in the top right, there's this settings icon. There's a couple things that are just kind of shelved in there that don't really fit other places. The first one is this direct printing beta. Direct printing is going to be the future of check-ins. It's faster, it's more reliable, and it's definitely more secure than what we were using before. It's in a beta now because it doesn't currently support Dymo custom labels, and it doesn't currently support Zebra. We're working on that, and that's going to be out of beta soon. But basically, if you're using Dymo, you should turn on direct printing for all those reasons. You'll be more confident in check-ins if you're using direct printing with that. Also, if you're using Dymo with custom labels, very soon here we're going to be supporting that as well for you to be able to use that. Zebra will be coming shortly after that, most likely. The other thing I want to show, but also if you are interested in direct printing, which you should be, go ahead and click on this. It tells you exactly what's going on, and lets you know if you're applicable or not, and that kind of stuff. But that's definitely the future of check-ins. Definitely check that out. The next thing I want to talk about is, we already talked about station keys a little bit. This is just where you create those keys here. But the next thing I want to talk about is templates. So let's say I've got 5 iPads at my church, right? And on Wednesday, 3 of those iPads are self, 2 of those are manned, and they all have like a green theme, right? And then on Sunday, all 5 are purple and all 5 are self stations, that kind of thing. If you have that, templates is here to help automate that change between those weeks. So basically, instead of having to go into each individual one and change them, you can create a template, and you can schedule that template to automatically go out there. So that's templates. I'll go ahead and go back. And then this is also where you would add your themes here. Let me see. The last thing I want to show you is our Checkistrations integration. And I'll be really brief here. Checkistrations is a word for check-ins and registrations, right? Checkistrations. And that's where those things are combined. The best example for that is like Vacation Bible School, right? So you can use registrations for everybody to sign up for Vacation Bible School. And then we have this assignments tab over here on the left. And this is really cool because in I'm not going to go over everything in registration. You can watch the Planning Center University video of that. But basically, with VBS, once everybody's signed in, you want to start putting them into their groups that they have. And those groups might be filtered differently or not than, how check-ins is used. So with registrations, you can do all of that manually if you want. So I can click and drag. You can see that some of these don't fit. I can click and drag them over there, or I can auto-assign them to that group there. And then once you're done, you can use this check-in button right here. What that's going to do is it's going to create an event in check-ins, and every one of these assignments is going to be a location in check-ins. So when they arrived for VBS, it'll print automatically without you having to assign or look at tabs or whatever. It'll print on their name label where they're supposed to go, what group that they're in. So that's really cool. That's registrations. What's really neat about the whole Planning Center thing in general is that it's all connected. So like if somebody signs up for your youth group, or somebody signs up for like a mission trip through registrations, you've never met this kid, the first time that they arrive at church and they check in, they're already in the system. You don't need to get the same information every time just because you're using different products. So with Planning Center, all of that stuff is connected, which is really cool. That's the gist of Planning Center. That's the gist of check-ins here. But I want to give you a couple more tips and tricks as we move forward. The first one is if you're just getting started out, I want to encourage you to start slowly. Don't buy all the devices and set up all the locations in one Sunday and try to make that happen. If it's your first time, start slowly. And generally the most success we've seen is if, like in the nursery, because we found that nursery parents might have a little bit more patience than others. So that's a good place to start. And because there is a lot of stuff that you need to figure out. It's not just what devices and printers and how things work and what's best for you, but it's also like physical things, like how do lines form in those specific areas? Should you move the station, 4 feet to the right to try to make sure that there's no funnels or anything like that? That's this kind of stuff you want to start slowly with. And check-ins will scale with you. So when you're ready to add more locations, just add them when you're ready. And then you can just grow as you go, which is kind of neat. On that topic, a lot of people have the question of what's the best devices I should buy? I've got two answers for that. First, if you're starting out, I'd encourage you to use the devices that you already have. You don't have to go out and buy everything. Most likely you probably have a laptop or maybe a tablet that you can borrow, and you can just try it out that way. So I encourage you definitely to try it out just to make sure that it's going to work for you. The second answer to that is when you are ready to buy certain things, buy the most expensive one that you can afford. And what I mean by that is sometimes if you're looking for the best deal, you might get like a 5-year-old iPad that's going to go out in a year because Apple stopped supporting that. So it's best to buy the most expensive thing that you can afford at that time. That's going to provide a lot of longevity for you. You don't have to buy like the iPad Pro or anything like that, but just like the newest iPad or the newest, kind of whatever basic model. Check-ins doesn't require a lot of RAM or anything like that. It just requires a strong internet connection, and most of the time you're going to be fine with that device. The other tip I want to give you, if you are starting out, try it out during the week, not just on a Sunday. You don't want to throw this at your volunteers and your parents on a Sunday for the very first time. You want to be able to work through some of the details yourself before doing that. So try it out during the week first. And the goal of check-ins, another tip here, the goal of check-ins is to have mostly self-stations. So what I mean by that is you don't want a whole bunch of man stations. That just takes a lot of time. You want self-stations. That's the fastest way to do it. Fastest way is self-stations and the Church Center app. Those type of things. The only reason you need man station is if you're adding or editing people. So most of the time that's, used at like a guest services kiosk or something like that. So try to have the goal of mostly using self-stations there. A couple more tips I have is, like I talked about before, you give your teachers access to a roster station on their phone so that they can know what's kind of going on. That's also really used for, like, let's say there's a fire drill, for example. You need to go out there. Those teachers, instead of having to print everything out, they can just look on their phone to see that day what the live information about who's in their classroom. So roster stations on their phone is the best way to do that. And lastly, last tip I have is to have a backup station on your phone. So there might be like a few volunteers that you trust and know how to do it. Have some stations on your phone for that. And the whole reason for that is the purpose of check-ins is to be fast, right? So if any line is getting long on Sunday mornings, you can walk around, see those lines, walk up to the next person and check them in with a phone and have it print through into another station, somewhere else, right? That's going to be the fastest way to speed all those up. So having backup stations on your phone for long lines, best way to do that. That's basically check-ins. I hope you learned a lot here today. If you do have more questions or need a little bit more help, don't forget about that question mark up there at the top right of the corner to contact our support team and read our articles and like that. And if you'd like to share this again, maybe you want to share it with your team or anybody else, you can watch it on YouTube. We'll upload that soon, or watch everything at planning.center/university.